Don't miss David Clark and James O'Keefe at Freedom Summit 2018. Get your tickets today at freedomsummitchicago.com.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So, Amy, yesterday I was at this Aces Up charity poker tournament for Urban Prep.
Oh, yeah.
Urban Prep schools that Tim King runs here in the city. And some of the toughest neighborhoods.
How'd you do?
All male high school.
Oh, yes.
100% African-American men. 100% graduation rate. What is it now, 16 years running?
Mm-hmm. And everyone that graduates, it goes to college.
Right. They've cracked the code there. And he, in his remarks before we started playing Hold'em, made the point, which I knew, but a lot of people in the room didn't. And just when we were talking during break, I mean, even though you know it, it's just staggering to hear it from Tim King. And you see all these kids that are either going to the school or graduates of the school that came back to volunteer because Urban Prep was so important to their lives. And it's really inspirational stuff. It's I mean, truly the Lord's work, what Tim King and his folks are doing. So they've averaged one student murdered every year they've been in existence. Two shot, essentially, every year. I think this summer it was like one a month. So you're talking about, these kids, they're all getting put on, they're either on because of their family or they're being put on the straight and narrow, and it's taking, and then they're going to U of I or wherever, and then they come back to the tough neighborhoods in which they live, and they take a bullet. I mean, it just couldn't be more exasperating. And so it speaks to sort of the toughest reform to discuss, much less address, in K through 12 education, which is what? Family.
Right.
Family.
Solid families.
Mom and dad and parental engagement in juniors' education, which is why I was so interested in this piece in the Wall Street Journal a little while back about a charter school, a network of charter schools in New York, public preparatory network of 3 single-sex schools, launched by a gentleman named Ian Rowe. And one of the things that he provides, or is provided, is a life knowledge course for 8th graders to help them envision futures where they won't have babies before they can support them. Trying to address the most difficult aspect of changing the future for people in urban centers, which is the family structure. So let's get a little bit better sense of what that exactly entails and how it's working. Maybe there's something here that could be scaled. Ian Rowe joins us now. Ian, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Amy and Dan. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
Our pleasure. So this life knowledge course, give me the genesis of it and how it is playing out in practice.
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I run Public Prep, which is a network, as you said, of single-sex public charter schools pre-K through 8th grade. And we're really proud of the fact that 90% of our 8th graders are, who started with us many years ago, are now in their freshman and sophomore years in college and doing really great. And just encountering a whole set of issues to maintain that success. And one of the things that we recognize is that for a lot of our kids, they're not necessarily seeing examples of the sort of rite of passage into adulthood that has normally been the way to success. And there's some great data that came out years ago. It's usually called the success sequence, which is a series of life decisions that, when done, 98% of the time, the kids that follow it land in the middle class or above. Mm-hmm. And that series of decisions is to finish your education, even just a high school degree, but finish your education, get a full-time job of any kind, just so you learn the dignity and discipline of work. Then if you choose to, get married, then have children, in that order. And when you do that, the odds of success or entry into the middle class are overwhelmingly in your favor. And so that's a set of information that we think it's critical for our kids to have beginning in 8th grade.
You, this piece in the journal that I referenced to says when you moved your charter school headquarters to the South Bronx a little bit more than a year ago last spring, you were dismayed to see a bright blue truck driving by emblazoned with the slogan, "Who's your daddy?" It was a mobile laboratory selling paternity tests through neighborhoods. And just so how did that sort of inform your understanding of the challenge before you in educating children?
Yeah, there are moments in life when you confront an event or have an experience that once having experienced it, you can't go back. And that occurred when we were doing our walking tour of our staff. We'd moved from headquarters in Manhattan to the heart of the South Bronx on 148th Street and 3rd Avenue. And just doing a walking tour, we saw this 27-foot baby blue Winnebago truck with all these people around it. And it had the letters in graffiti writing, "Who's your daddy?" to discover that this was a paternity test, which helped, primarily poor people paying $350 to $500 to answer questions such as, "Is she my sister? Are you my father?" And this is a thriving business. A second truck has now been added. It's made trips throughout New York City, Washington. I think it's actually been in Chicago. There was a VH1 reality series focused on this truck. And so for us, it just suggested again that for our kids who are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, they haven't yet had the chance to make the big decisions in their life that will give them a sense of personal agency. So when I saw that truck, I said, we have to play a different role. It hasn't always been the case that schools had to be the place that taught something like the success sequence, but the institutions through which kids normally learn these things, whether it be in their own family where they had role models, or in their own neighborhoods where they saw lots of more stable families, or in popular media, or their religious institutions. All of those institutions themselves are then frayed. So there's a greater onus of responsibility on schools because we're the last remaining institution that have kids, at least 10 months a year, and we have in my view, the profound responsibility to ensure that our kids at least know that this is a pathway to success.
Wow. Now, what kind of feedback have you gotten from parents and the students?
Well, this is not something that schools have taken on, and it can be somewhat controversial. I mean, in general, our parents want us to be the adult in the room because in some cases they made different choices. They didn't necessarily choose the success sequence in their own lives, but they don't necessarily want that for their kids. And they want us to be the ones that don't cower to fear and say that this is what we really believe is in the best interest of your child. And so, it is very important to engage parents to explain, why we think this is so important. So we're not blaming the victim, we're not moralizing, but we're saying that there are real rewards or consequences to different decisions that your child will make. And it's really important that they know what those are. So we have to be brave and frankly have sort of courageous leadership to say these things to our kids and our families.
Your background is interesting, MBA from Harvard, and you were an executive at MTV, where you, I guess, were at least in part responsible for, the Rock the Vote and other campaigns that MTV did that focused on young people participation, making healthy decisions. So 2 questions. One, can you get Amy an autographed picture of Kurt Loder? And whatever happened to that guy?
I don't know.
And
Kurt's
two,
amazing.
I did love him. And 2, so how did your experience at MTV inform what you're doing now as a charter school operator?
Right. Well, I'll work on the Kurt front. He's amazing.
Thank you.
Second, well, I've had the privilege of working for a number of large institutions that affect the lives of kids. So, I was at the White House post 9/11. I was at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and at MTV, and now, running a network of public charter schools for the last 8 years. And throughout those, I have had insight into what are the factors that really drive long-term success for kids. And there are a lot of short-term interventions, but it is irrefutable the role that family structure, the timing of family formation, along now with this other data about finishing your education first, full-time work, essentially being ready, emotionally, financially. That's just real data that needs to be integrated into the curriculum for kids. Frankly, from an MTV perspective, if there were more messages in popular media around this rite of passage into adulthood, because schools can't bear this burden alone. So, if this same message were integrated into popular media, in religious institutions, just popular culture, and so kids were hearing this over and over again, it might actually give them the anchor and the backbone to withstand the very immediate pressures that they may have, that they're getting messages exactly the opposite of the types of decisions that they should be making. So, our hope is that, what we're doing in our school hopefully will get replicated elsewhere and not only within schools.
He is Ian Rowe. He's the CEO of Public Prep in New York. Good write-up in the Wall Street Journal from the spring, a class on life knowledge offered at New York City Charter School. Ian Rowe, thanks so much for joining us. Continued success with your charter schools.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.